being alone. Shalala. Ain't the empty hole, baby. Shalala. No, I'm good on my own. Shalala. Shalala, baby. You know it's more than being unknown.
Hello there, and welcome to you wherever you may be. I have a lot of chaotic thoughts today, a lot of negativity towards Gurdjieff. I was looking today at some beautiful European artwork of their folk tradition and their gods. And if you say, "May the gods be with you," it gives you more a sense that you could be one of them, that you could join them if you only lived rightly. The ideal of life, as it had been, is that by living without fear, by living with true passion, that you would generate a high energy around you and you would shimmer. And when you die, you would be that new body. And that is what you see in the ancient Hyperborean art of the European white people, with their blonde hair and their blue eyes. Lives in the semi-Arctic, struggling against the environment, made those men and women tough. In Africa and India, they have picnics by the lake, but in the north they are fighting the elements. Europe was the Holy Land. Gurdjieff saved his own people, his own family, but he wasn't European and he had no family there to save. He took money from the English and the Americans. He cursed them, he called them shit to their face, whilst they paid for his school. And he sat in a fancy cafe in Paris, eating crayfish and licking Armagnac off his fingers. And he left an awful lot of very confused people. But what I can say is that many great men are like this. They are devils inside, they are distorted men, and they have struggled like hell to overcome their own idiocy. And Gurdjieff did leave a great legacy that perhaps one day could answer the questions that mankind has tried to answer throughout its history. Perhaps. I had it in mind to read out this section from one of Fritz Peter's books. It says, "Each life had, according to Gurdjieff, a purpose and rhythm of its own, and it was only our abnormal fear of death and the fact that we seemed to regard it as not only fearful but evil that forced us to attempt to prolong physical life at any cost. It was especially valueless since life as we know it had little value or conscious purpose even for those who were completely healthy physically and in no way threatened by disease or death." He was interested in the statistics concerning major diseases, the primary killers, and said that the prevalence of heart disease and cancer, for example, was proper to the kind of civilization we had produced in which we had to live under constant strain and pressure. Many of Gurdjieff's adherents were depressed by his often repeated flat statement that human beings could really learn and could still change only until they reached the age, usually in the early 20s, of a certain kind of maturity, the moment when they ceased to grow automatically. Once that point had been reached, life was nothing more than a kind of running down process. Well, when I'm faced with the impossible, I simply cheat. But I don't cheat downwards like most people. I cheat upwards.
I'm not a violent person, but I would like to hold them down and skate over their throats.
Guys, maybe if you concentrate on the skating, people will forget all the hype and they'll focus on the purity of the sport and the spirit of honest competition. You guys just want to cheat again, don't you?
That's a good idea.
Much better.
There's something interesting I thought about this week. It's not what it should be, but what it shouldn't be. How is it that people do their work and get through the day, but avoid being part of good old duty? What is it actually that they do when they get into the office or the building site? What is it that they do that isn't three-centered work, that isn't the work of a man? I have the sense that people go into the office, their fancy corporate jobs, and they do fuck all. Now, I think this is an interesting area of study, to watch people and to say that is not being part of good old duty because. A friend of mine was telling me about her corporate job. Sometimes she gets put into a different department, and the manager says, "You know there's a playbook for that kind of work." But she made me laugh because she said, "Playbook? I don't need a playbook. I've got a brain." I wanted to talk about the pandemic a little bit. At the beginning, there was this question about whether you were going to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine. I could see this was building up to be a bit of a nightmare. And after carefully analysing the case reports and thinking about it, I realised that the answer was not A and it was not B. The answer was to simply get out into society and catch COVID and recover. And once I had done that, the problem would be over forever. And that's exactly what I did. I remembered that from time to time, when I had the habit of going to coffee shops every day, that I would pick up something here and there. And so I made it a habit to go every single day and for a long time to a coffee shop. Well, the point is that whatever society is talking about is irrelevant, because they always talk about A or they talk about B. And the answer is always C. The answer is never displayed, because to see it is to do it. Once you see the answer, it's like you see the question. Society is locked in this two-step dance between two dead sides. And I think you can use that, because every time you see a burning question of the day, you know it's neither A or B. And you can look in a third direction. Gurdjieff says in Search for the Miraculous that a theory explains what you already know, which is another way of saying that society is not trying to solve problems. It does not actually understand the question. It cannot see it clearly. Once you can see a question clearly, the answer is forthcoming. So you're not really looking for an answer, you're looking for the question. Another application of that is a problem is difficult if you haven't got enough information. Get more information. Look at it from more sides. Other elements of concealed energetics that happen in life. It seems that you can have a conversation with somebody, but unless you label something, they won't accept it. For instance, if you're in a conversation with somebody and you say evidence-based, suddenly their ears will prick up and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I agree with that," because they've been programmed that evidence-based is the thing that they're meant to agree with. The programming of people is based upon highly resonant catchphrases. For instance, the Jewish thing is interesting because they have a lot of strange words like anti-Semitic rather than, anti-Jewish or something. It's quite a strange word. The Jewish culture is concerned with a lot of really strange words, and those strange words have a kind of shock factor that gets into the mechanism of the false self. Another energetic factor is the sudden collapse of societies, or sudden collapse of buildings, or sudden collapse of businesses, or of people's health. How does that happen? Well, actually, there is a hidden descending octave that you cannot see, because an entity holds its shape energetically, even though it might be declining, and suddenly it'll shift into a lower state. In other words, the energetic potency of an entity is not visibly displayed because it holds a particular state. Even though the energy of that system might be declining, the shape still holds, but when it gets to a certain low threshold, it'll suddenly shift and drop down. And a corollary of that is that we need to understand that entropy is always acting, and so we always need to be light-bringing people. A man of light illuminates everything he touches, everything within reach, everything he thinks about, everything he feels about. You have to be, in other words, always going up, reaching for the heavens. Gurdjieff used to criticize people, but who was it that he hung around with? He was in the most bourgeois place on the planet, hanging around with lesbians and riffraff. What was he expecting? And when people like Ouspensky, who were serious men, turned up, what were they given? I am probably more like Ouspensky in that I want answers. The difference between me and Ouspensky is that I have done tens of thousands of hours of many different kinds of practices, and of course the world is different now. Many of the materials I use were made in the 70s and 80s when there was an explosion and sincere interest in all sorts of methods from India, China, Japan, all places on the planet. And they do things. They do things. I'm a bit tired of immigrants like Gurdjieff stationing themselves in white Christendom in Europa and then complaining about it and taking the crayfish and the champagne from the maitre d' at Café de la Paix and then condemning people. Gurdjieff was a great genius, but his means seemed to be coming from a very narrow area of magic. And he was not able to save his institute, his wife, or himself. But I believe that his cosmology and reading of the problem is absolutely precise. As I said, he did not at that time have the kind of access that Western people have today to an incredible number of techniques and materials. The real path seems to be highly counterintuitive. All those states that people in India experience, they must be part of those higher bodies. They do not come from nowhere. They do not hang in the air. Furthermore, the many eyes are not inconsequential. They are very consequential. I would also say that the Jews must hold some kind of knowledge or position that is important for the evolution of human beings. And that although many amazing things could have happened in the past, even in the very ancient past, I do not believe that mankind has ever really solved the problem. The goal is to weave the chaotic primordial energy at the base through our being particle duty, to weave it higher and higher and higher until we become illuminated like suns. That is the goal. And one understanding of Gurdjieff's working like a man is to, through whatever activity you're doing, force that primordial energy to be woven, so through one channel it is ordered. And if you perform many different types of work, the primordial energy becomes ordered again and again and again, rising higher each time. However, Gurdjieff did not have much space for surrender, for the passive force, that yieldingness and softness, because both things need to be used together. That's why evolution never happens on its own, because how can a man be yielding and soft one moment and vicious like a wolf the next? It is that man who can evolve, who brings together in each hand the cathode and the anode and holds it in his teeth until the lightning comes through. It is a rare man who can do that. Can you be intellectual as well as emotional and physical all at once? Can you honor all things? Can you do that? Because that is what is needed. It will not happen on its own. It will not happen nicely or easily. There are many people who suffer. And throughout the history of human beings, many people have tried enormously hard. And we must complete the journey if we can. If we look at the practice side of things, it is saying quite a lot that Gurdjieff's ideas about three-centeredness seem to be completely missing from every other spiritual tradition on the planet. Are you able to do something that is not possible? Can you do that? Can you face a situation you've never faced before, not knowing what to do, and yet do it? Those situations are few and far between, unless you want them to be. Human beings do not wish to leave where they are, and they are unaware that there is even something that could lead. They are unaccustomed to doing unknown things. Even in a simple way, I saw one of the venerable students of Gurdjieff in England the other day give a lecture about the cosmology in Search of the Miraculous, and then at the end he mentioned a few phrases from the Bible. There was no sense in him of doing any kind of practice that would connect the one to the other. For English people, and for most Western people, they are unaware that there are actually technical spiritual practices. And it's not just that they can't find a good spiritual teacher, but that they can't even find a good plumber, because the skills are largely the same. But on the other hand, I suppose English people have a perfect right to the expectation that their society is managed sincerely so that they can live an untroubled life that is actually going somewhere. They do have a right to expect that. But it is just not the case, at least not today. If I go back to the cycling thing I did a few weeks ago, which is very important, what you may then observe is that both the feelings and the intellect can roam free and not participate in the movement of the body. Not only that, they can be highly stimulated. You can have great feelings and be having a great time whilst your body is moving. The emotional center can be active at the same time as the moving center. But that is not what Gurdjieff described and not what he intended. What did he intend instead? As I say these words, there are two lines that are appearing in my mind which point to two passages, one in Search of the Miraculous and one in Beelzebub's Tales. I can feel it. They are forming in the sphere of my mind as I contemplate this question. Knowledge that is hard-earned is etched deep.